So welcome and happy Valentine's Day. So one of the principles that we so often hear and that we so often say is God is love. It's comforting, it's inspiring, it's uplifting. So as a phrase, I just started thinking about it as we sit here in the month of February when we talk about love. It just caught my attention as we continue to explore this theme. So that's what I want to focus on today, the notion that God is love. It's a huge idea. And so in the next 20 minutes, okay, maybe 19 minutes now, we are going to unpack this thought and look at it from its different aspects. Okay, just part of it. We're not going to look at all of it. We're going to begin. And hopefully on Wednesday when we have our community discussion, we'll talk about it a little more and we'll just continue to reflect on what we mean when we say God is love. So it's one thing to say God is loving. That's much easier. For many of us as we grew up, we lived with the notion of a God as loving, as compassionate, as forgiving, or perhaps as angry and judgmental, or all of those things. That God ran the full gamut of human emotions, as many of us do. That's not hard to understand. But God as love. God is love. What are we saying, I wonder? What aspects of God translate into love, and vice versa? Is the universe, all of creation, you, me, everything that is, all of it created and knit together by love? Is that a scientific principle, a theological one, a spiritual one? All three and perhaps more? Who knows? Even though it may be impossible to describe what we mean, the statement, God is love, is the true north of what we and many other faith communities believe and teach and try to live, and it's worth looking at a little more closely. So first thing, let's recognize a limitation that applies to every single word I'm going to say next. When we talk about God or love or truth, our words, any words, fall so far short. They are descriptors of our own personal experience. The words I say are descriptors of my personal experience, as are yours for you, or they are metaphors that we hope others can resonate with and understand. If I were to say, for example, my love is a red rose, you probably would not believe that my love was a red flower. What I would be doing is communicating the wonder and the passion and the beauty that I feel for my beloved. We all understand that words will only take us so far. When we talk about God, by and large, in many instances, we speak in terms of metaphor. So the first truth that we recognize when we talk about God, or when we try to, is that God is ineffable, or as Merriam-Webster defines it, as incapable of being expressed in words. We cannot fully articulate, with the words we have, we cannot fully articulate the nature of God. Remember the first line of the Tao Te Ching? The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. You can name something, but not the fullness of the Tao. As Hindu sage Shankara put it in the invocation to one of his prayers, O Thou, before whom all words recoil. I just love that. O Thou, before whom all words recoil. They're just not enough. The words just fall. They just can't do it. Words are just pointers. They give us imagery that may direct us toward a truth that we are trying to share. Brother David Steindl Rast has given us a useful way to think about this and indeed use it to expand our awareness. This is what he says. He writes, Christians need to think nothing when they call God love. Buddhists need to think love when they say emptiness. This will at least wake us up to the fact that words must always fall short of the ineffable. So what is he saying? He is saying that when Christians think about love, they should substitute the word nothing. So let's do that. Take the phrase God is love and substitute God is nothing. Does that energy change for you? Does it mean for you that God doesn't exist or there is no God? Or do you come away with a deeper understanding of the nature of ultimate reality? The energy for me, when I think of that phrase, is that God is no thing, and indeed is everything and beyond. Hindu sages describe the search for this ultimate mystery, this ineffable mystery, as a process in which you go about and you regard everything that exists, every person, every being, everything, and for each you look at it and you point and you go neti, not this, neti, 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 not this, not this, not this. When you have done that for all beings and all things, what's left is God. It is nothing. Karen Armstrong points out that perhaps the only correct attitude in the presence of the holy is, as she puts it, reverent silence. When we experience those God moments, words simply fail us. We are overcome with wonder, with awe, with humility, but not often with accurate descriptions. There's a well-known saying in Zen Buddhism, he that speaks does not know, he that knows does not speak. There's nothing to say. What can you say? So the first thing we need to acknowledge when we try to discuss the nature of spirit, by whatever name you call it, God, spirit, whatever name you use, is that we are at the heart of ultimate mystery. Even though we are normally so good at describing things, not this. On this journey, we don't acquire additional information, but we fall deeper into the layers of unknowing. As author and teacher Carl McColman put it, the deeper you go, the more elusive God becomes. In the Hindu tradition, and I'm going to call it that even though Hinduism embraces many traditions, the truth at the essence of all things that we might call God or ultimate reality is Brahman. This Brahman was a concept developed during the late Vedic period around 1000 to 600 BCE. And what happened at that point? Sages in that part of the world and other parts of the world began to move into the age of exploding consciousness, exploding awakening that we call the first axial age. And it lasted until about 200 BCE. It's called the axial age because it reflected a profound shift, a turning as if on an axis. It was the age of the Buddha, Lao Tzu, Confucius, the Hebrew prophets, Socrates and Plato, and the sages of the Upanishads. Moving away from the emphasis that had been before on ritual observance, formulaic following of ritual practices, the axial sages focused on what? They focused on the expansion of inner consciousness, on the awakening of our inner landscape. It was a transformational shift, and it continues to be the foundation of our spiritual practices today. We stand right now, here, on the shoulders of these visionary men and women. The Mundaka Upanishads teaches this wisdom this way. Here's what it writes. Look at these rituals. When the fire is lit, pour butter into the fire in 2 spots, then place the offering between these 2. Such rituals are unsafe rafts for crossing the sea of samsara, of birth and death. Doomed to shipwreck are those who try to cross the sea of samsara on these poor rafts. Ignorant of their ignorance, yet wise in their own esteem, these deluded men, proud of their vain learning, go round and round, led like the blind, led by the blind. But those who are pure in heart, who practice meditation and conquer their senses and passions, shall attain the immortal self, source of all light and source of all life. It starts off describing a ritual. Here's where you put the butter. Here's where you place the offering. And then it says, these rituals are unsafe rafts to cross the sea of birth and death. It's not hard to talk about ritual, about where one pours the butter, how many steps one takes, or one places the offering. However, words become a bit more scarce as you try to articulate the truth you perceive as you sit in meditation. That is deep truth. It is ineffable truth. In discussing the concept of Brahman, the Hindu sages encountered a problem that we encounter today, that language was simply inadequate. To demonstrate and honor this truth, they developed a ritual competition, is how they viewed it, called the brahmaja, which in essence it was a match to see if any of the participants could express the true nature and mystery of Brahman. Just imagine this. The match would continue until a competitor, they would just speak back and forth, deeper and deeper truths. And the match would continue until a competitor could literally find no words to respond and was just reduced to silence. After silence fell, the participants together experienced the transcendence of the mystery of Brahman. As Karen Armstrong put it, the competitors felt one with the mysterious force that held the whole of life together. When we explore the nature of God, we turn into this mystery. So, in thinking about this, what is a useful way to approach it? So, I'd like to explore in this talk 3 aspects of spirit, or activities of spirit, that may help us understand more fully, or at least conceptualize more fully, the notion of God as love. The first is creation. The first activity of God in love is creation. This wisdom moves past the notion that God created the world and then loved it. Instead, love itself was the mechanism of creation. Love is first principle, first mover. 16th century mystic and poet Mirabai put it this way: I heard a voice speaking to me. The young woman whom you see is love. She has her tent in eternity. It was love which was the source of this creation in the beginning, when God said, "Let it be," and it was. As though in the blinking of an eye, the whole creation was formed through love. The young woman is radiant in such a clear, lightning-like brilliance of countenance that you can't fully look at her. She holds the sun and the moon in her right hand and embraces them tenderly. The whole of creation calls this maiden Lady, for it was from her that all of creation proceeded, since love was the first. She made everything. Love was in eternity and brought forth, in the beginning of all holiness, all creatures, without any admixture of evil. Adam and Eve as well were produced by love from the pure nature of the earth. All creation created by love, spontaneously. The creation of unadulterated love. St. Thomas Aquinas, 2 centuries earlier and coming from an entirely different faith tradition, expressed this truth in this way. He wrote, "It is out of his goodness that God bestows being on others." It is out of his goodness that God bestows being on others. God's essence is thus what theologians have called letting be. His self-giving of being to all of creation. He gives his own self in this act of love. Love and creation come together in this gift of being. We see that God is love, embodied in the act of creation then and now. This love as creation continues to flow around us and as us and through us in every moment. Love as the first mover. The second aspect of spirit that I'd like to raise to illustrate God's love is revelation. This is what the mystics give us. Through love, spirit reveals to us the truth of who we are, as well as our place in this often confusing and chaotic world. So think about it. What are our fundamental questions that we ask ourselves? Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? We just don't know. So let me give you an image that illustrates this point. You may have heard this story. The Venerable Bede gives us the picture of a large banquet hall, a large hall, lit and warmed by fires, while a wintry storm rages outside in the dark night. A sparrow flies in from outside, darts around the hall for a while, and then leaves through a window back into the dark night. He says our lives are like that. We are here for a while, but, as he puts it, of what is to follow or what went before, we know nothing at all. These are the questions that propel us on our spiritual journeys. Throughout the centuries, men and women on this journey have shared their own answers with us. We have called them the mystics, dedicated to a personal experience of the holy. They tell us of that satori moment that each one of them has, a glimpse of ultimate knowing. It doesn't last. It's just an insight, a flash, a glimpse. The Upanishads tell us of a knowing of that, the knowledge of which brings knowledge of everything. It's not a knowledge of detail. It's a knowledge that is so consuming and so vast and so all-encompassing that the detail doesn't matter. It's the knowledge of that, the knowledge of which brings knowledge of everything. The awakening so many have related is one of overwhelming love and oneness. Across faith traditions, they say the same thing. From the Sufi tradition comes the wisdom of Farid ud-Din Attar, who wrote, "In love no longer thou and I exist, for self has passed away in the beloved. Now will I draw aside the veil from love, and in the temple of mine inmost soul behold the friend, incomparable love. He who would know the secret of both the worlds will find the secret of them both is love." Regardless of faith tradition, that moment of insight, that aha moment, reveals inexpressible love and oneness. At our very essence, as well as the essence of all that is, lies this incomparable love. Our highest joy comes in knowing it and experiencing it. It answers our questions about who we are, where we come from, where we are going. We are one with love, with all of life. We come from it, we abide here in it, and we return to it. God is telling us this if we will hear, if we will listen. A story is told of the sage Ramana Maharshi as he lay dying of cancer. His students were gathered around him. They were so upset, begging him not to go, not to die, begging him to please cure himself. He didn't understand what they were asking. He looked at them and he responded, "But where would I go? But where would I go?" No separation, all oneness. He's telling us, he was telling them, to get past this illusion of separation. So the third aspect of spirit, in terms of the activity of spirit as love, that I'd like to talk about is reconciliation, or relationship, or connection. The love of God towards us, and through us, and as us, transforms our way of seeing the world. It transforms our way of being in relationship with each other. It cannot help but do that. It moves us back into relationship with each other, away from this illusion of isolation and separation. It reconciles us one to the other in love, restoring the harmony that we so often, through our ignorance and our fear, disrupt. The early Christian scriptures urge us to love one another because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. What a wonderful message. What is that saying? We are born in God through love, not through adherence to some religious creed, not through following some religious rules. It is love that creates us in God. This is a mind-bending thought and binds us to each other. All the enduring faith traditions teach that love and compassion for others leads to our greatest joy, leads to our greatest peace. Benefit certainly comes to the other, whom we love, for whom we feel compassion, but also to us. Each faith tradition teaches kindness, forgiveness, service as pathways to the holy. When we can see our world in this way, when we can shift our paradigm and see each other and our world in this way, when we can embody this divine giving, letting be, love in our own hearts, families, and communities, our lives and our world are profoundly changed. And we can do it anytime, anywhere. Thomas Merton writes of one of his most transformational experiences, which happened one day on a street corner in Louisville, Kentucky. Not in church, not on his knees, not in meditation, not walking in the woods. He was on a street corner in Louisville, Kentucky. This is what he writes in his book, Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander. In Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all those people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of spurious self-isolation in a special world, the world of renunciation and supposed holiness. The whole illusion of a separate holy existence is a dream. This sense of liberation from an illusory difference was such a relief and such a joy to me that I almost laughed out loud. I have the immense joy of being human, a member of a race in which God became incarnate, as if the sorrows and stupidities of the human condition could overwhelm me, now that I realize what we all are. And if only everybody could realize this, but it cannot be explained. There is no way of telling people that they are all walking around, shining like the sun. That's the message. God's revelation of love tells us that we are all walking around, shining like the sun all the time, even when we don't feel it, even when we are so burdened and afraid and feel alone that we can't even think to take the next step. So when we say God is love, we celebrate spirit alive in all those aspects we've explored and so many more. Let's share them as best we can, even when descriptions fall short, because they will. Because what truly matters is that we each realize at every moment that we are surrounded by the holy and that we are all walking around shining like the sun.